The security situation across the country, particularly the tension in the northeast, is again gaining global attention, with the European Union raising serious concern about the humanitarian situation there. They say the situation is not improving at all. The increasing attacks on innocent citizens, illegal checkpoints by insurgents, and the murder of aid workers are all critical issues, and the EU wants them addressed urgently. The EU Commissioner for Crisis Management, who is on a visit to Nigeria, wants the federal government to seek a political solution to the crisis, as thousands of internally displaced persons who had earlier returned to their ancestral homes are now going back to IDP camps.
For over 10 years, Nigeria's northeast region has grappled with insurgency that has left tens of thousands of people dead and many others displaced in dire need of humanitarian assistance. According to the European Commission, there are currently 1.8 million displaced persons from the states of Adamawa, Borno, and Yobe alone. A total of 2.9 million others are facing serious food crises in the region, while 1.2 million, including women and children, are cut off from humanitarian assistance. The EU expresses serious concern about the deplorable humanitarian situation and attacks on aid workers in the region.
In recent weeks, we have seen an upsurge in violent attacks from non-state armed groups and an increasing trend of illegal checkpoints on major supply and commercial routes, directly targeting civilians, authorities, and aid workers, especially in Borno State.
Additional aspect, which is important and I underlined in my discussions here, is the need to ensure security and safety of humanitarian workers. Regrettably, recently they have become targets, which is completely, totally unacceptable under international humanitarian law.
Federal government troops have battled terrorists in the northeast for almost a decade now. The European Union believes that it is now time to strengthen regional collaboration and seek political solutions to the crisis.
The crisis in northeast Nigeria is a regional crisis, and it has a regional dimension. So the regional actors that have been affected by this crisis are also equally very important. But I also call on the government to explore the opportunities for a political process in the search for a durable solution to this crisis.
The government of Nigeria has put in a lot of resources to the military to see that they're able to fight these people. But as you know, with crisis, no matter how much you put, sometimes we begin to see that we don't see the impact. But we're doing our best, the government is doing its best.
There is no doubt that the 10-year-old crisis in the northeast has especially caused serious socioeconomic damage to the region, such that both the states and the federal governments must now urgently find solutions to the crisis before it snowballs into an unmanageable calamity.
And the president is also worried about the security situation and is promising an end to the crisis. President Muhammadu Buhari made the comments today when he received the European Union's Commission for Crisis at the State House in Abuja. He told the EU delegation that it might take a bit longer, but the nation will surely bring an end to the trouble in the northeast in order to move ahead. The president believes that if Nigeria was capable of fighting a 30-month civil war and pulling through, then there is hope that the war would soon be forgotten. The president's comment is contained in a statement which reads in part, "I assure you of Nigeria's commitment to enhance and deepen cooperation with the EU in all areas. Our priorities in the next level is to ensure that internally displaced persons are rehabilitated so that livelihoods are restored, and the children should not lose the opportunity to go back to school, which is very important for the future of that area and Nigeria generally." The EU Commissioner's visit to Nigeria is part of the European Commission's commitment to Africa to discuss joint Nigerian and EU priorities and the situation in the northeast. Now, for the governors of the All Progressives Congress, community policing is not a bad idea, and they are restating their commitment towards ensuring that the initiative aligns with the nation's laws. The co-chairman of the forum and governor of Plateau State, Simon Lalong, says the forum is not opposed to the Southwest Security Initiative, known as Amotekun, but insists that all community policing efforts must be executed in line with the Constitution. He explains that Nigerians need to unite in the fight against terrorism.
On general term, what we did after presentation from the security agencies, all of us appear to be talking about community policing. That one, we're all agreed on that. Talking about, so we don't want situations where you start doing something and then the federal government will say you are doing it outside the law. Just like we said about Amotekun today. It's now that they are doing dialogue. They are beginning to, even if they are going to operate that, it must be within the law. So what is within the law as far as governors are concerned is the issue of the community policing. We are all agreed on that, on the issue of policing. And like my co-chairman said, when you go into implementation, you use different kind of methods. Like he said in his state, in my state, I have opportunity. I made a brief in Lafia, and I told them I've been using almost community policing for a very long time. I'm privileged to be in Jos, and in Jos I have about 3 organizations, 3 security outfits. I have the headquarters of the division. I have Operation Safe Haven established by the federal government for only a few states at that time. And I have what is called Operation Rainbow. To us, Operation Rainbow is like a community policing.
Now, we still have our eye on security matters. Members of the Interfaith Dialogue Forum are also raising an alarm over the proliferation of small and medium arms into the country. They want the government to tackle the challenge and prosecute those responsible for killing innocent citizens. Another idea suggested by the Interfaith group is the introduction of courses and curriculum in schools that will promote peace and religious tolerance.
The proliferation of small and medium arms is alarming, and government is encouraged to rise up to the challenge. 17. That there should be robust engagement with religious and traditional leaders as gatekeepers. 18. That curriculum on peace, justice, and reconciliation should be added to our schools. 19. That Interfaith Dialogue Forum for Peace condemns the wanton killing and incessant destruction of lives and properties, regardless of who are the victims. 20. The family values should be taught to the youth, which will curtail the excessive neglect of children by parents. 21. Parents should earnestly embrace their ordained responsibilities and duties. Government must arrest and prosecute those responsible for the killings in Nigeria if there is still any leadership in this country. Government has exhausted her window of excuses.
Meanwhile, the law caught up with some suspected kidnappers of a lawmaker in Ogun State today. The 4-man gang is said to have abducted Honorable Shoni Taiwo, a member of the Remo North Local Government Caretaker Committee, on January the 10th. State police authorities say no ransom was paid before the victim was rescued unhurt.
Upon interrogation by our tactical teams, the information gotten from the arrested 3 kidnappers led to the tracking down of the one that took flight to Oyo State. And it was equally tracked to Oyo State, and it was promptly arrested and brought to come and face the full weight of the law. So as it is, 4 kidnappers were involved, namely Mohammed Abdullahi, Ibrahim Diko, Gambo Abdullahi, Mohammed Suleiman. And the beauty of this is that the victim was able to identify all the 4 suspects and those that took part in that act of abduction and kidnapping.
Well, it's not just security agencies that are concerned about the safety of lives. The Monetary Policy Committee of the Central Bank is also asking the federal government to seek innovative ways of securing the country's and its challenges. The Central Bank Governor, Godwin Emefiele, mentioned this at a news conference after the committee's meeting in Abuja, where he explained that the insecurity in some parts of the country has affected food production, leading to high inflation. The committee is also concerned about the nation's debt profile and calls for a rise in the revenue profile to address the fiscal challenges.
It's the first meeting of the Monetary Policy Committee for the year 2020.
Distinguished ladies and gentlemen,
Expectedly, members of the committee are on hand to brief journalists on the outcome of the meeting. First, the central bank governor gives an overview of how the international market has fared and its impacts on the nation's economy.
Although global output is projected to expand moderately in 2020, compared with the previous year, the overall medium-term outlook for the global economy remains uncertain due to the persistence of several headwinds. These include the lingering trade tensions between the U.S. and its major trading partners, rising levels of both corporate and public debt, likelihood of continued geopolitical tensions in the Middle East, fragile recovery of the manufacturing activities, and a narrowing policy space by which central banks in the advanced economies can respond to future macroeconomic shocks. In addition, predicted weather-related disasters could pose further threats to global output recovery.
Next, the governor of the Apex Bank reels out the considerations of the committee. These include an increase in credit flow to the private sector, which has impacted some sectors of the economy. But there are concerns in the areas of insecurity, debt level, and the need to reduce dependence on monthly allocations.
The committee identified infrastructure deficit and the long-standing clashes between herdsmen and farmers, which are constraining domestic production and contributing substantially to a rise in food inflation. MPC therefore urged the federal government to relentlessly seek innovative ways of addressing security challenges across the country in order to boost aggregate food supply.
And thereafter, he states the decision of the committee, which includes the retention of monetary policy rate at 13.5%, an increase in the cash reserve ratio from 22.5% to 27%.